Since no one's holding the red card for me, just pardon me while I start my timer. I want to make sure I am a faculty member first and foremost. And as a faculty member, I love to talk. So anyway, I'll do my best to keep within the bounds of the time frame for this session and leave some time for questions after the presentation. All right. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here with you today. I've been looking forward to this opportunity for quite a bit in thinking about the great disruptions that we've been through in the past few years, and the chance to have us all together in the same room and bring in scholars and researchers from all over the world into the room with us via Zoom technology is an incredible honor. This is my first international travel since COVID, and so it's especially delightful to be here with you all in person. So in thinking about today's session, it's a great opportunity to think through what we've been through in the past 2 years, and some of the implications for the disruptions that we have experienced and that we are experiencing, and how we can possibly leverage these events and developments that we've been through for good and for educational benefit. So let's start by thinking about the metaphor that I've used as the basis for this presentation, the legend of the Phoenix. Are you all familiar with the legend of the Phoenix? Okay, many are, and I'll tell you a little bit about this legend. It was interesting to kind of dig into it to learn more about its history myself. It comes from Greek mythology, although it has representations from many different cultures around the world, and it represents the cyclical process of living, death and rebirth, regeneration of life. So without getting too spiritual, it has a particular application, I think, in today's conversation about what we've been through in terms of these great disruptions to education and learning, and the period that we're going through now, which I believe has shown some promise and opportunity for some positivity and new developments for application and learning. Okay, so with the death of the Phoenix, this bird apparently, and again, this varies across different cultures and representations about how the death of the bird occurs. But in the Greek mythological version, the bird sets itself on fire and burns all the way to the ground. And from the ashes come sparks of promise. Okay, so that's what I want to leave here today with you, with some sparks of promise in terms of educational development. So the two major phenomenon that we'd like to focus on today in terms of disruptions are, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic that we're coming out of, and the development of AI and its application in educational settings, which is taking off like wildfire. Both of these phenomenon have significantly disrupted educational systems around the world. And however, though, in addition to all the negative impacts that these developments have had, there have been some positive developments as well. So what we'd like to do today is to explore these disruptions and their impacts on educational systems, to examine the sparks or the emerging trends coming out of these disruptions, to consider possible ways forward. What can we do from here? And then a call to action. Okay. To frame this discussion, I'd like us to think about education as an ecosystem. And there are many different stakeholders in this ecosystem, but the student is always at the center. We are all stakeholders in the ecosystem as educators ourselves, as scholars, researchers, educational practitioners and professionals, administrators, and there are many other stakeholders in the system, family members, employers, society as a whole, the political systems, values and beliefs of the stakeholders around us, policies and procedures. There are many different factors that influence a student's success and learning. So I want to keep that framework in mind as we work through these topics today. So let's think for a moment about our roles in the ecosystem, right? Many of us are educational practitioners. We're teachers, we're faculty at universities, and we design learning experiences targeted to the needs of the students at the center of the ecosystem. We are also educational researchers, and we're here to share our scholarship with each other. We employ methodologies that advance knowledge and inform best practices in education for learning. So with this context in mind, let's jump right into the first disruption, the COVID-19 pandemic and the global shift to emergency remote teaching and learning. I'd like to talk for a moment about the article that Joe mentioned, because I want to reference it here in a little bit. At the beginning of the pandemic, in March of 2020, I was actually in Savannah, Georgia, which is not where I live. I'm from Virginia Tech, and live in Blacksburg, Virginia. I was in Savannah to pick up my son from college for spring break. And while we were there, we were told, oh, by the way, get all his things and take them with you because we're shutting down. And while I was there, I got a message from one of my former students who said, we really need to get an article out quickly about this shift to virtual teaching and learning because a lot of people are going to associate this with online education. And we know that's going to negatively impact further some perceptions about online teaching and learning because online and distance education has, for many years, for decades, often been viewed as less than, or its quality has been questioned in many cases. So we wanted to get the word out that what's happening now is an emergency. It's a response to a crisis. And, we educators are going to do the best that we can to make this work. But this is not online education because online education, distance education is developed over time with intentional planning through a systematic process. And so we wanted to make that distinction. Little did we know the impact this article would have. EDUCAUSE Review put it out right away, which was another, I think, interesting and beneficial phenomenon of this, of the COVID pandemic, this rapid publication process. Anyway, the piece went viral, so to speak, over the past few years. As Joe mentioned, it continues to be cited daily, and I think that just shows it resonates with people around the world. This message that emergency remote teaching is its own distinct kind of teaching. It's a response to a crisis. It's meant to be temporary, and online education is a well-developed discipline and approach. So I think the distinction is important. And as you all went through emergency remote teaching and learning, the challenges of it. This mandatory transition to remote instruction came with many different challenges. I've only listed a few here. In many cases, there was a complete absence of the infrastructure to do this. So this was an act out of necessity to make instruction, to make education continue. And in many cases, the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure, the human infrastructure was not there to do it, or was there in a limited way. So we had to get creative to make it work, right? And the literature in the past few years is replete with examples, which are fantastic. Descriptions of how we made it work. So some fantastic engineering and overcoming of technological and human infrastructure challenges to make it all work. In many cases, as you know, there was limited or lacking experience in virtual teaching and learning. Even with the popularity of distance and online education for decades, still, most educators around the world had not had this experience to have to shift to teaching using technology. So it was a totally new experience for most educators. And then the challenges we faced across the board in terms of the ecosystem of stakeholders, we all faced challenges, whether it was our own health, the health of our families and loved ones, the loss of families and loved ones, having to work together, kids and parents together working at home, kids doing school, parents doing work, trying to make it all work, maybe with a single device, maybe with limited bandwidth, maybe having to drive to different locations to access a network. We went to incredible lengths as educators and as families and as administrators to make this whole thing work, with great challenges that we faced. And I want to say, I don't want to represent a rosy picture here today, that we're all good, we're all clear. We know this is not true. We know that we're coming out of the pandemic, as Joe mentioned, that we're on the heels of it, right? This post-pandemic era, as we're calling it. We still have a variety of challenges that we're fighting through. Mental health issues for all stakeholders involved in this situation. We're still recovering from the impact and the trauma that we've been through for the past 3 years, being in isolation and removing our presence from other people. Being together, that's what makes us human, right? And so we're still recovering from that. There's incredible educator burnout, and we've seen a large departure from the teaching profession. And so this is a significant challenge that's still being faced and dealt with. And then there are also these changing perspectives, as Professor Bonington mentioned, on the value of higher education. This investment in higher education is being questioned now. We're seeing it in the U.S. with decreasing enrollments in traditional campus institutions. However, let me not be so grim all the time. Let's turn toward the positive here. So what are the good things that have come out of this negative picture that I've just painted for you? And sorry to make you relive the past here a little bit for a few minutes, but looking at the ashes of what we're calling the post-pandemic era, what are some of the good things that have come out of it? All right. So one of the positive outcomes that I've heard a lot of faculty talk about, both as a colleague at the University at Virginia Tech, where I work, and across my professional association, as Joe was mentioning, the Association for Educational Communications and Technologies, colleagues who work across the country and around the world, the opportunity to rethink what we do in the classroom and online at a distance, the opportunity to think, how can we best meet the needs of students? What choices can we make? How can we leverage the lessons that we've learned after what we've been through for the past 3 years and make it better? Now that we have, some experience behind us, we can look in retrospect and think, what are the ways that we can make learning more effective for our students? So in addition, though, to opportunities to intentionally redesign the learning experiences based on the lessons that we've learned, that's as an individual in the education ecosystem. Looking more globally, we've seen a demand for the increase in educational access, right? So we forged these paths to make instructional continuity work, right? The access to education during the pandemic. It's like letting the genie out of the bottle, right? Can we get it back in? No. So now that access has been built and these infrastructures have been developed to make educational opportunities more accessible, institutions are building on that, right? And that is in response to the learner at the center of the ecosystem who's expressed a desire to continue having this kind of access, to continue having flexible learning opportunities. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. So, and then also increasing demand for flexible learning options across the educational trajectory. And I mean from elementary education all the way through lifelong education. There's a demand for more flexible learning opportunities. And I'd like to distinguish between those two. Online and distance education, open education, certainly provides a flexible opportunity. But the demand that I want to talk about later is the demand for flexibility for residential campus students and for students in primary and secondary institutions and their families who have continued to express a desire for flexible learning. So how can we accommodate that? So let's look at the notion of the growing demand for online education. So again, that we let the genie out of the bottle. We made educational continuity work, and in that developed these infrastructures and capacity to in the systems to continue making it work. So I mentioned there's a decline, at least in the U.S., in enrollments in these traditional campus-based universities. We've been blessed at Virginia Tech to have increasing demand for undergraduates, but our graduate enrollment for on-campus is seeing a slight decline. However, there's an 11% increase in enrollments in online programs at the major online universities, at least in the U.S., the major online providers. And by those, I mean the institutions for whom online and flexible education is a core value and principle, right? Like the University of Phoenix, aptly named, and Western Governors University. And interestingly, in Virginia, while Virginia Tech is the largest public institution with a land grant mission, just down the road, about 30 miles from us, about 45 minutes away, is one of the largest distance education providers in the country, in the U.S. It's a small Christian university, about 1,500 on-campus students. Liberty University has a massive online education following, in the top 4 in the country. So while they do have this physical presence not too far from where I live, but their access to their educational offerings is global and tens of thousands of students. It's massive because they invested in this delivery mode many, many years ago and made access to education through their university a priority, right? So they developed the infrastructure for it. So these large online universities are seeing continued demand for access and growth. Now, also, I'm speaking about higher education there. Let's think a little bit more about primary and secondary education. The demand for access to virtual education in these markets is growing as well. And so in the U.S., we're seeing a tremendous amount of growth in the establishment of virtual academies for primary and secondary students to meet not just students with particular specialized learning needs, which has typically been the case in our history, but for everyone, because this demand continues to grow. And again, this is I think, progress in terms of making learning accessible and meeting the needs of the learner at the center of the education ecosystem. So there's been also an increase in demand for flexible learning options. And again, I realize online education provides one approach to making learning more flexible, right? Such as Birkbeck University, right, who offers education for adults to come after work. The Open University, another great example of a university whose core mission is making learning inclusive and accessible, right? So, but flexibility can be afforded in any number of ways. It's not just at the institutional level, and or at the program level even, we can think about, as educators, making learning more flexible, even within the context of our own classroom. So how can we do that? Well, where the learning opportunity is offered is one approach. Of course, distance and online education meets that need, allowing us to engage in learning practically anywhere. Depends on the program, right? Like you might have to come to a campus, such as Birkbeck, come in the evening, come to a place. You might be able to do it at home, or you might be able to engage in learning at work. But having the opportunity to engage in learning away from a university or at the time of your choice or at a time that's convenient for you offers another flexibility. So time is the second affordance of when learning can occur. Now, I want to tell you a little story about our online program at Virginia Tech. We developed an online master's program in instructional design and technology in 1998. Back at the advent of online education, right? The teachers in the state of Virginia were mandated by the state government to develop a set of technology competencies. And so we wanted to develop a master's program that they could engage in to develop these competencies. The way we went about designing the program at first was a cohort model in 3 geographic cohorts across the state, right? Dispersed from one end to the other. So 3 groups of 25 teachers in each cohort. And we designed the curriculum in a very lockstep way, right? We broke the curriculum down 30 credit hours into 5 weeks for 1 credit hour modules for 5 weeks. So 3 of those in a semester. You know, take this one first, take this one second, take this one third, and everybody moved through at the same pace. What we found at the end of the first year was that we'd lost 25% of our cohort. The teachers, who are working adults, simply couldn't keep up. And when they couldn't keep up, they dropped out because they realized it would take them another 2 years to catch the class the next time, right? So we learned from our mistake, I think. This is learning from failure, right? Which is a good thing. We learned from that initial implementation that we need what flexible education means. So we took the curriculum, we did away with all the deadlines. We made the learning activities completely asynchronous. And in the first iteration, we were going to meet with these cohorts physically. We would call them together, twice during a course, we would go meet with them. They said, we really enjoy meeting you in person, but we don't need it. So we were heartbroken, of course, but anyway, we listened to them and we took those in-person meetings out, and we made it completely flexible as possible within the learning ecosystem of Virginia Tech, right? We're traditional, undergraduate-based campus. And so we operate within those constraints and affordances, right? We have semesters, we have enrollment periods, we have graduation requirements. So there are certain things we can't break, we can't disobey, but we could take away the deadlines for assignments. We could take away requirements for synchronous meetings. These were some of the So we revamped the curriculum to be as flexible as we could. So anyway, that makes for a better experience. And again, going back, it puts the learner at the center of the learning ecosystem. So back to other forms of flexibility, we can provide different delivery formats. So how we represent information, whether it's through text, through video, through live synchronous chat sessions, we can represent learning events and learning programs in different ways, and that helps meet different learner preferences as well as specialized learning needs. And then the content, what we allow or share with learners in terms of their ability to have control over the learning content, right? If we empower learners with choices about what they learn, about their instructional activities, about their assessment options, we know through research that this can enhance motivation and engagement. So giving some opportunities for choice and learner control is another way that we can afford flexibility. In all of these things, we have at least some degree of control over as educators and also as educational researchers. These are some variables that are very interesting to look at in terms of designing flexible learning experiences. There's been quite a lot of research done in this area over the past several decades. Okay, so higher education's response to, in terms of the ecosystem, to helping provide these kinds of flexibility has been one way is to institutionalize these choices of delivery approaches. Remember back in the fall of 2020, when it was such a tenuous time, right? In the spring, we were shut down, no in person, right? At least for the most part, because we couldn't be together. And then there was the great anticipation of the fall semester coming together, and then some false starts, at least in the U.S. Some of us started and stopped and started again. So what happened in terms of our registrar's office, at least at Virginia Tech, is that we came up with a system of different approaches to instruction. This class is available in a hybrid format. This class is available on campus. This class is only available online. So we've added to the instructional delivery mode options, and those have, at least at Virginia Tech, they've become institutionalized. We're not going back, which is great, I think, because this is a benefit of having gone through what we've been through and making learning more accessible. As educators in the ecosystem, we can respond at the course design level with some of the kinds of flexibility that we just talked about here with flexible design strategies. And so an interesting example, I think, at Virginia Tech that's current is that we have a new cybersecurity program that was developed during the pandemic. So it was completely online. And it's actually based in the Washington, D.C. area. But now it's being redesigned with a focus on a hybrid approach to bring the students together a couple times a month at our new campus there, the Innovation Campus. But very intentional designs, not like we were thinking, 25 years ago when we first started, that people just wanted to be together for the sake of being together. There are different purposes for educational interaction. And so this group is being very intentional about the times that they bring learners together to leverage the opportunity to have everybody together in the same room for the kinds of instructional activities that require this kind of thing, right? Learning from each other, collaborative activities, debates, discussions, having people together in one space can be facilitated that way in a different way that it is online. But anyway, it brings some different opportunities, I think, and they're being very intentional in how they're designing this program. So going forward from this first disruption and rising upward from the sparks, I think one thing that gives me some hope for the future is the history of what we've been through in education in terms of learning from education from emergencies. Education in emergencies, I'm not sure if you know, I just learned this recently, is a discipline, it's a field of study. And so there are scholars who have looked at educational responses to different kinds of crises, right? Whether it's a natural disaster, a man-made situation, maybe it's war and conflict. Many scholars have been studying education in emergencies for years. So in addition to that literature, we can look at in the recent literature that the thousands of articles that have been produced about emergency remote teaching and the lessons that we've learned from it. Decades of research can be leveraged about distance and online education and how to effectively design for distance and also flexible learning experiences. We can also learn from models. I want to bring your attention to the HyFlex model here. Anybody familiar with the HyFlex model? So this was developed by a scholar named Brian Beatty in San Francisco State University, probably like 20 years ago, I think, in response to an earthquake there. He developed this approach which has become a model around the world for a hybrid approach to teaching and learning, but in a very responsive, time-sensitive way, right? So he thought about and designed class activities on a weekly basis based on input from the students. Can you get to campus? No. Okay, we'll meet, online, or when you can get to campus, do you want to come to campus? How many of you want to come to campus? So he would gauge his class plans on a weekly basis and then communicate with students. Okay, this week we'll meet online, and here are your readings, and here are our activities. And if you can't make it, we'll have the recording. So again, providing flexibility. This has become a widely referenced model for how we can make learning opportunities more flexible going forward. And I've got links built into this presentation, which Matthew has graciously offered to link to the Vimeo recording after the conference. So if you want to access the presentation and the resources that I've embedded in it, I hope you will take advantage of that by downloading it later. Also, there are terrific communities of practice. I've already mentioned the first one, and have links to these different associations. The Online Learning Consortium and EDUCAUSE are also different organizations who focused on mediated learning and online and distance education. We have a lot to learn from them and engaging with scholars who work in this area. All right, disruption number 2, the arrival of ChatGPT. All right. And so I'm giving it short shrift here. I'm sorry, but in the last remaining 15 minutes of the session, but because Sarah Custer and I are going to tackle this topic for an hour with you right after a short coffee break. But anyway, just get the juices flowing here. What is ChatGPT? Have any of you used it? Yeah. Okay. Do you know that it's been adopted at a rate faster than light speed? It's incredible, really, and I'm not exaggerating. I exaggerate a lot, but that one I'm not exaggerating on. This AI tool that uses natural language processing to respond to prompts, right? It's kind of terrifying. I think it's amazing, and at the same time scary. The potential that it has is incredible. And if you haven't used it yet, I hope you will give it a try here and engage with others who have used it, who can continue to use it and have great ideas for how to use it. The reason that this tool is quite different than other artificial intelligence tools is that it generates new content based on our input, and it engages in human activities as if it were a human, right? And one of the coolest things I've seen a couple of days ago, a script to teach me how to give better feedback to students. And so based on the prompt that I wrote, it gave me some guidance about choosing the right location. It sounded a little bit like breaking up with a loved one, but anyway, choose the right place, like in a public restaurant. No, be sure you have your thoughts together and structured in a way your points. And opportunities for input from the person you're engaging with, from the student in this case. Anyway, it gave some very helpful guidance. One in a million examples. And I have some other examples and resources built in here and we'll talk a little bit more later. But why is it so disruptive? Why are people looking at ChatGPT so alarmingly? Well, there are these incredible issues of authenticity because it's really good at creating new information, right? New text, new videos of things that never happened, new audio, spoken word of things that I never said. It's kind of cool, but also kind of scary. So you can have people who aren't living anymore. If you have access to voice recordings, you can have them saying new things, even though they're no longer with us. They engage with conversations with people who are not here. So anyways, these issues of authenticity are quite challenging. The output of ChatGPT is often incorrect and sometimes potentially misleading. The effectiveness of the output is based quite a lot on the effectiveness of how well the prompts are written. Did you know that prompt engineering is a new profession? It's really incredible. So we have new forms of work coming out of this innovation. There's serious data privacy issues. What you put into the system can never come out. So don't put anything in there that you don't want to share with others. The system, when you input information into the system, it stays and it grows the system. It helps the system get better and more accurate. But again, that data stays in the system. So just something to consider. The algorithms are written by people. And people have bias. So the algorithms have bias. And that is something to be mindful of as you're thinking about the outputs of these algorithms. This tool can be used for nefarious purposes. I've already mentioned a couple. Don't want to get too negative here, but the challenges around truth, truthiness, as we like to say, are not insignificant. So again, not to be too alarmist, but I think we need to be aware of this. In education, another challenge, I think, is a surveillance response. Like we have to figure out how to stay a step ahead of the system, right? And the system keeps getting a step ahead of us in terms of detecting whether or not our students have used ChatGPT. I've watched an algorithm that goes into Canvas and completes an exam. So think about the impact of that for a minute. So there's a lot of effort being put into alternative algorithms to detect these sort of ChatGPT uses, and then to overcome when the system skirts around that to figure out how to get to detect the use of the second system. So anyway, the story goes on. But there are sparks of promise, I think. ChatGPT can be used very productively by educators and also by students alike. And I think because of this, it's imperative that we as educators become familiar with it. There are a few ideas for educator application here. I'm just not going to read through those. I'm going to just let you take a quick spin through them there. And these are all linked in a link I'll share on the next page. There's a few ideas here for student use, idea generation, everything from creating projects to working collaboratively, and also to make what you've done better, like the technical aspects of writing. It can improve grammar, spelling, things like that. That's pretty low level. But for someone who might be working in a second language, might need some help with some of the nuances of the language of instruction, this can be a fantastic tool. So I want to give credit to Tori Trust at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, who has this terrific resource I hope you'll access later. It's an open access choice board that she maintains with an incredible array of resources about the use of ChatGPT in education and the challenges and opportunities. So how can we prepare to engage? I think, as I said a moment ago, literacy about artificial intelligence and the use of ChatGPT in education is essential. It is not a nice to know, it is necessary to know. And this conference is a terrific opportunity to learn more about it. We need to develop an awareness of how it works for good, and also how it works for not so good. And the implications for its use in education. What is the power of this tool? How can we use it? How can we help our students use it? And so I think one of the tensions for me anyway, as an educator and researcher in learning about this tool is I understand and embrace the need to learn more about it. And I've been trying to do that. I'm sure you have too. But it's like hitting a moving target, right? So there's this tension between needing to know and then what we need to know constantly changing. So I feel like I'm running a marathon that's never going to end. So anyway, this, not to be so pessimistic though, I think this conference brings a great opportunity of scholars who are working in this area and practitioners as well, who can learn from each other. So I'm glad you're here to share your ideas. So institutional response, we're responding at Virginia Tech. I've just gotten the, okay, I'm good. Thank you, Joe. So we're responding through different ways of engaging with students and faculty, working groups with faculty, conversations with department heads, and then some opportunities to work with students. Areas of focus, again, increasing familiarity with ChatGPT, developing a set of shared principles. I want to jump to that quickly. There's been an incredible amount of policy development just in the past couple of months, and I think it's helpful to be aware of these developments as well. Everything from policies and guidelines at the institutional level, like the Russell Group just came out with an excellent statement. I hope you'll access it. To look at this consortium of universities and their collective response to the use of ChatGPT. Governments, I have some examples here for UK, US, Singapore, and UNESCO's guidance for policymakers. And then responses from the academic publishing community, who are naturally alarmed. and many of them, including, I have an example here, Cambridge University Press, setting a policy that AI cannot be used as an author or co-author, and many other publishing companies have followed suit. The Australian Research Council just prohibited the use of AI for grant application feedback. They learned that reviewers were using the tool for reviewing applications. Even though I think, technically it might do a pretty good job at that. The ARC took a stance and said, no, this must be a human activity. The feedback must be human. So in the last couple of minutes here, I want to say, in terms of final thoughts, I want to leave you with a call to action. I think we as educational researchers have the capacity and also the imperative to advance the knowledge base about the application of AI in education and its impact. That's something that we can do together, right? We can engage in research that advances knowledge, as well as emergency remote teaching and online learning. We've all learned a lot about that. I know many of you have engaged in research about these two topics and continue to do so, and I hope you'll share it here with us or at a future IAFOR conference. There's some different research approaches, I think, that naturally lend themselves to the examination of these disruptions, design-based research, and here's a link to learn more about that, and quick response research developed in response to natural disasters, taking advantage of non-traditional and unconventional sources of data to inform knowledge, right? So QRR, quick response research. And then public scholarship will continue to increase in value as we disseminate these findings through different ways to get information out into the public. So in summary, I think engagement with others across countries, but also across disciplines, in different contexts is essential to share the research and best practices that have come out of these disruptions. IAFOR provides an excellent forum to do this. And so an excellent means to disseminate your research and efforts and to develop awareness yourself of the work of others in these areas. IAFOR provides the mechanism to do this. Through more than 70 countries here together today. I'm thinking about the impact that you'll have around the world when you take all, the new knowledge that you've gained, and thank you for sharing the knowledge and information and learning and research outcomes that you've brought here to share with others. And with that, I'll close and wish you enjoy the conference. Thank you.